Welcome to Sydney Science Education. My name's Karen and today we're going to have a focus on frogs. I wanted to start with you thinking about whether or not you have seen or heard any frogs in your garden, backyard or local park. Have any of you heard frogs? We'll often hear frogs calling coming into nighttime, especially after rain or when the weather is nice and warm. So this time of year, it's starting to get a bit colder. We're not hearing as many frogs as we might have heard in November, December. But it's always good to listen out because you never know if there's a frog about. I'm going to be sharing with you today some of my interest in frogs. Now, I'm really lucky. I've had my pet green tree frogs for about 15 years. I have a special terrarium where I keep my frogs, and we can often hear them calling at night. I know that I've got all male frogs. We're going to explore some different species of frogs. First of all, we're going to look at how all animals are classified. So if you imagine all of the animals in the world, they are broken up into two main groups: animals with backbones and animals without backbones, so vertebrate animals and invertebrate animals. Vertebrate animals have backbones, so if everyone wants to put their hand behind their back to feel your spine or your backbone. Your spine is made up of individual bones called vertebrae, and that's where the group with internal skeletons get their name, vertebrate animals. Vertebrate animals include birds, fish, amphibians, with our frogs in, mammals, and reptiles. And amphibians are a really interesting group of vertebrate animals because of their life cycle. So who can tell me what we call a baby frog? Oh, I hear lots of people calling out tadpoles. Excellent. So frogs have a very interesting life cycle, and the word amphibian actually means two ways of living. Frogs spend the first part of their life in water as tadpoles. They grow their back legs, then their front legs, and their tail doesn't drop off, it absorbs back into their body, and often we'll call them froglets or toadlets. And then they emerge as an adult frog and spend time on land. But frogs all need moisture and water to breed, to lay their eggs. The male frogs are the ones that make the calls, and they're calling for females. During breeding season, you'll often hear lots of different frog species, but also lots of individual males calling, saying, come over here, come over here. And they're using their big calls and their croaks to attract a mate. Let's have a quick look at the life cycle now. So we can see on this picture here, the eggs, the tadpoles, growing their legs, their back legs first, then their front legs, then the juvenile frogs, all the way to the adults emerging on land, and the males calling, and the life cycle continues again. So amphibians are vertebrate animals. They have an internal skeleton. But what makes amphibians special is that two ways of living, on water and in land. We could see that with the life cycles with the tadpoles. But it's also important to think about when they're on land as adults as well. Let's think now about what's covering our vertebrate animals, our animals with backbones. What do birds have covering their body? Does anyone know? That's right, feathers. So all birds can be recognised because they're covered in feathers. Mammals are covered with fur or hair. Reptiles have dry, scaly skin. Fish also have scaly skin. But what about frogs? Frogs have soft, moist skin covering their body, and this allows water and oxygen to pass through. So it's very important that we don't touch frogs with our hands in case there's something on our hands like sunscreen, moisturiser, Aerogard that might impact the frogs because they can absorb that through their body. And that's another reason why frogs are really important parts of the environment. If there's too much pollution, chemicals in our waterways and on land, frogs can be impacted by this. So when frogs disappear, sometimes it's a sign that there's lots of other environmental problems. And today we'll be exploring about ways that you can bring and encourage frogs to come live in your backyard, your local area, or your garden. In Australia, the only native amphibians we have are frogs. We have 240 different species of frogs that have been identified so far. But we also have one species of toad, and that's the cane toad that was introduced into the 1930s and has caused lots of environmental harm across Australia. The cane toads are large, they like to eat lots of animals, and they're also poisonous. So any native animals that eat the cane toad can also get sick and die. So it's really important that we learn more about our native frogs so we can help track the spread of the cane toad as well. Now we're going to have a look at some interesting features of frogs. This is a slide of a lot of frog feet. These photos were taken by Dr. Jodie Rowley from the Australian Museum. Can you tell me how many toes do these frogs have? That's right, they've got 5 toes, just like us. We can see lots of different colours, some with sticky pads, some with more webbing, some with no webbing and no sticky pads at all. And this gives us a clue to where the frogs might live. Let's have a look at some hands. Everyone put your hands up. How many fingers do you have? How many fingers do our frogs have? That's right, frogs only have 4 fingers. And again, we can see lots of fingers with sticky pads, some with little bits of webbing, but others are good for burrowing. By looking at the hands and feet of the frogs, it gives us information where these frogs might live. The colours can help camouflage. We can also see if they might be climbers, because of those sticky pads on their fingers and toes. They might be digging, because did you know many frogs actually burrow? This is another great picture from Dr. Jodie Rowley with a lot of frog eyeballs. And again, it is fascinating to have a look at the different shapes and colours. The colours and the patterns help the frogs camouflage as well, but we also can see that some of the pupils go up and down, some go side to side, some even in almost like a square or cross shape. It's amazing to see the big variety of frogs. Of the 240 species of frogs across Australia, they're living in all habitats. We have frogs living in our rainforest, frogs living in the desert, even frogs living in the alpine regions of Australia like the corroboree frog. But guess what? There are also frogs living in your backyard, and some frogs love backyard habitats and are doing quite well in urban environments. But other species that used to be found in our backyards have disappeared as well. So that's why it's important to remember to listen and look and observe and see if you can discover more about frogs in your backyard. Let's have a look at the green tree frog. Have a closer look at its hands and feet. So this is the green tree frog. Do we think this frog loves to climb? Well, it's a bit of a giveaway by calling it the green tree frog. It means it's green and it likes to live up in trees. We can see those sticky pads on its fingers and toes that help it climb really well. We can also see the eyes. The slits of the pupil go side to side. Oh, he wants to show his feet now. His white tummy. Those long legs that help them jump. The big mouth. A great shot of the eyes. He wants to show us his toes again and his hands. So remember, 5 toes, 4 fingers. Frogs are more easy to identify by what they sound like than what they look like. Most frogs are very small, very hard to find, but even the smallest frogs can make the biggest call. And by listening to the frogs in your local area, it will give you a clue about how to identify them. You can use the Frog ID app and website to help identify frogs in your local area. Just record a frog call, submit it, and scientists at the Australian Museum will identify the frog for you. You can also do your own research on the Frog ID website and listen and research frogs that might be found in your local area and find out whether you've heard any of them. So let's have a closer look and listen to how frogs make their call. This male frog has its extended vocal sac, and that's how they make their calls. They push air into their vocal sac, and as it goes in and out, it's making the sound. Every frog species has a different sound. What's important to look at this picture is we can see the vocal sac is a living part of the frog. It's not an extra flap of skin. We can see that there's a blood vessel running through there, that it's a living part of the frog. And when they're not calling, the vocal sac sits flat along the body. Let's listen to some frog calls. Let's start with the green and golden bell frog. The green and golden bell frog was thought to be almost extinct and was found in the brick pit at Sydney Olympic Park when they were building for the 2000 Olympics. There are now many individuals of the green and golden bell frog surviving in the brick pit and around Sydney Olympic Park. Let's listen to their call. It's quite amazing, isn't it? This is the green tree frog, the same species that I have living in my terrarium and that I've been showing you today. This is quite a big specimen of a friend of mine. The green tree frog used to be very common across Sydney, living in outside toilets and drain pipes, but isn't found as much anymore. It's still very common around Australia, but not a common urban frog for Sydney anymore. But you never know, you could be lucky. Listen out for this call. Now guys, how about we try to do the call of the green tree frog? Let's see if we can make a green tree frog chorus. Let's give it a try. I always describe it as a bit of a croak. So C-R-A-W-K, if you can spell a frog call. Let's give it a try, everyone. Croak, 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 croak. Oh, I think we can all do better than that. Nice and loud. Croak, croak, croak. Quack, quack. Great job, everyone. Now, frogs are great at camouflaging as well. Under this leaf here, we've got a striped marsh frog, and lots of people tend to find striped marsh frogs when they're gardening in the moist leaf litter. And this is one of the species of frogs that's not going to like a pond. doesn't like deep water. It likes moist, squishy, boggy areas. And that's why they love backyard gardens. But the striped marsh frog has a great call. Let's listen to it now. Let's see if we can make the striped marsh frog call. Lots of people don't think they have a frog in their backyard when they hear the striped marsh frog call. So let's see if we can make it now. All right, let's do it faster and louder, everyone. See if we can make a striped marsh frog chorus. Great job, everyone. So there are some amazing frog calls out there. It's really worthwhile doing some research on the Frog ID app and website to discover the diversity of frogs that are found across Australia. Some of those frog calls will be a surprise. Listen out for the motorbike frog, the rocket frog. One of my favourites is the turtle frog, one of the burrowing frogs from Western Australia, and I think it sounds a bit like a duck when it calls. So there's lots of fun focusing on frogs and doing research to discover what's in your backyard and beyond. Now we're going to have a look at my green tree frog having lunch. Hopefully you'll see the frog once he catches the cricket closing its eyes. So frogs will actually use their eyes to help them swallow, especially when they're eating really big food. We were looking at the frog's mouth before. It's all the way from the ears, very large mouth. And it means they can eat very large prey. But sometimes they try to eat things a little bit bigger than they should, and it's very hard for them to swallow. So they actually use their eyes and close their eyes to help push the food down into their stomach. So let's have a look, see if our frog is ready for lunch. We can see that really big mouth. There's a cricket leg sticking out. He's using his hands to help and closing his eyes as he's swallowing. He was definitely hungry. 2 crickets in one go. We could see those eyes closing while he was eating. Let's look at ways how you can create a frog-friendly garden. The first thing to do is research. Discover the frogs that could be found in your local area. Observe and listen to find out if any of those species of frogs are found in your backyard. Once you know what frogs could be found in your local area, you can design a frog-friendly garden. I've got some information to help you work out what kind of habitat might be the best one for the frogs found in your area. So what do frogs need? Research and find out what frogs live in your local area. What type of habitat is most suitable to these frogs? Do they prefer a natural stream or a creek? An above-ground pond? An in-ground pond? Tree frogs aren't going to like any of those habitats, and we could look at building frog tubes or a frog hotel. Once you've researched, you can start designing the perfect habitat for your frogs. I wonder where this frog might want to live. My sister took this photo. She said the frog was about 2 centimetres. Really, really small. So a small habitat might be what this frog needs. Places for it to hide. Animals need food, water and shelter. So let's have a think about what kind of habitat you could build for the frogs in your area. The next slides I'll show you are 3 different habitats I've built in my yard to provide habitats for a variety of frogs. Firstly, this is a frog hotel, frog tubes. These are great for tree frogs. Now I know from listening, certainly through summer, that I've got the Perrin's tree frog living in a tree behind my house. Lots of them. But to encourage other types of tree frogs into my yard, the frog tubes can be a great way because they can hide in the tubes, safe from predators. Lots of people don't realise that some frogs can drown. So if you have a deep pond, make sure that there's branches, plants or sticks so the frogs can get out safely. Other frogs do like deeper water. It's always important to know and research the frogs in your garden to know what habitats will be safe for them. This is a pond in my backyard and it's got a deep section of water and shallow sections as well. Lots of water plants and plants around the edges to provide shade and habitats for the food that the frogs want to eat as well, making sure that you've got some shallow places where the frogs can easily get out. This is an above ground pond. This one here is an old pot that I put a cork in and sealed, filled it up with water and plants, and some frogs are quite happy to breed and lay their eggs in an above ground pond like this. It's great to provide a variety of habitats, and that means more frogs living in your backyard. But remember, the best way to start is research. Discover the frogs that live in your local area to design the right habitat for them and encourage frogs to live in your backyard. Other things that are really important to create a frog-friendly garden is don't spray pesticides. For 2 reasons. 1, remember, frog skins is moist and can absorb water and oxygen from the outside environment. Those pesticides can make frogs very sick. But also, what are frogs going to eat? If all of the insects and spiders and other animals are died, the frogs won't have any food to eat either. So always remembering all animals need food, water and shelter. So no pesticides, creating a variety of habitats for your frogs. Thinking about where your pets are as well. So cats outside at night time can also impact and eat frogs. So just thinking about everything that's going on in your backyard to make it a healthy environment for frogs. Another important one is don't collect frogs for your backyard. If you build the right habitat, the frogs will come. It might take a few seasons, but the frogs will find their way. So you can't actually take frogs from one area or tadpoles from one area into another because that can really impact on the species, spread disease and create an unhealthy environment. So remember, with frog ponds or frog habitats or frog hotels, if you build it, the frogs will come. Thank you for joining Sydney Science Education today. It was great to focus on frogs today, and I really look forward to hearing about your adventures creating frog-friendly gardens. Thank you.